The title of this video should be like Dad's on Ice. So it was winter of 2013 in Atlanta, Georgia, and the most notable thing that happened at that time was a snowstorm of about 5 inches that shut down the city for a week. Most of the country is familiar with the Buford-Calloway sketch on SNL, entailing getting stuck on I-85. The only thing to drink was 2 liters of the sweet, sweet Dixie champagne in the trunk of your white Escalade. I had just finished up driver's ed. I only had my permit. I wasn't even 16 yet. I called my dad to come get me home from school because we ended the day early.
And I looked out and everything seemed fine. So I, stuck around and waited, and then finally I left. And as I'm driving up to her school, the snow is just pouring down. I'm driving a big 4-wheel drive Mercedes, and I'm thinking, hey, I've got this. This is easy. I've got all this experience driving on slippery surfaces. I know what I'm doing. And as I'm driving along, even on this well-worn road, I'm starting to slip. I'm starting to feel things. And the traffic at this point is just getting ridiculous. And people are sliding into each other. It's just turning into a huge mess. I picked her up. I start coming around this one long sweeping curve kind of on the downhill, and there was a UPS truck. All of a sudden, I put on the brakes, and it's like ABS starts lighting up, and I'm like, oh my God, okay. There's being a skilled driver, and then there's trying to drive on something this ridiculous, because it was absolutely insane. And I think, for people who live in the northern states, they all laugh at us Southerners. We don't get snow plowed, but it's not even like that snow that you can just drive on and you have traction. This was like a weird phenomena where water came down first, it froze, and then another layer hit, and it became this sheets of ice.
My dad, he was in the middle of a midlife crisis of all midlife crises. He had just set the Cannonball Run record with Ed Bolian. He had just bought a Lamborghini. He was in the middle of a new startup. He was confident at the time.
We were right next to this office park, and I thought, at this moment, my daughter, she's taking driver's ed at this time, so hey, what a great opportunity to teach my daughter how to drive on ice.
We're going down Roswell Road, and we pull off into a parking garage, and I'm like, Dad, what's up? What the heck? And I start to kind of freak out because I've never driven on ice. I've hardly driven before in my life.
We pull up onto this parking deck, and we switched places, and we start driving around, and I start saying, okay, now just start making kind of a long turn arch and just sort of see how it feels. And so it starts to sort of spin out, and we turned off traction control as well. And so it would just, she'd start to get the feel of driving on ice, and I had her experiment with putting a little bit of acceleration down, and it would shift a little bit of the weight to the back, and she would pick up some traction, and just worked on all these little nuances that you don't typically get by driving on a dry surface or even a wet surface.
It's, for the most part, pretty okay. And then he's like, okay, wow, you're doing pretty well. Now, let's switch back again. I want to do some donuts. And I'm like, oh, geez.
So I was like, you know what? I'm going to show you what I used to do when I was a teenager, when it was ice out like this. So I just started driving it across the parking lot really fast and spinning it, doing donuts, just doing circles, just doing these big long drifts. And it's actually really hard in a 4-wheel drive car to do this, but I was actually starting to kind of get the hang of it as well. And it was all fun and games. It was pretty awesome. So she was like, hey, I want to do that. And I'm like, sure, why not? I said, just, keep it away from the walls, and it's all good.
And now he's driving, doing donuts. I'm just kind of sitting there in the passenger seat, like, kind of freaking out, but like quietly, And then he says, now it's your turn to do some donuts. And I say, no thanks, I did not want to do that.
And so she starts doing it, and doing spins and and power slides. The seat belts in the Mercedes were just like continually doing this thing where they like tense up because it thinks you're about to have a big crash.
Pushed it a little bit harder, and maybe I went a little bit too hard, and I spun out, and all of a sudden I am heading towards the wall. And it was in slow motion. So the wall was coming towards me, and I was going towards the wall. And at this point, I realized there was nothing I could do to stop it. So I just kind of braced and went for it.
And I don't know what she was thinking at this point, but she kind of gunned it and tried to make it spin a little bit. And next thing I knew, she overcorrects, the whole thing spins and goes, whew, boom, right into the wall.
I thought, I was never going to be able to drive again. I thought, somehow the DMV would find out and I wouldn't be able to get my license. I was catastrophizing at this point.
And she starts screaming, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And, airbags didn't go off, thankfully, but it hit the wall pretty good. I looked at it, and the headlight and some of the other lights along the corner were cracked. There was a little bit it looked like it had pushed in just enough to do some damage to the quarter panel, just a little bit, and the bumper.
I was obviously traumatized. I started, hysterically crying.
We crawl our way home, and I'm still having to, take her down from like 11 to like a 5, and then it would keep going back up. She'd start getting upset again. It's like, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. It's not your fault, it's not your fault. And so I soon started to realize that it really isn't her fault. And this point was reinforced when I walked in the door and I explained what had happened to my wife. Because she looks at me, she didn't look at our daughter and say, why'd you run it into the wall? She looked at me and it's like, why'd you let your daughter run your car into the wall? You dumbass.
I'm still feeling bad, but now I'm like, wait, this is not my doing. Why would you ask a 15-year-old to drive a, big Mercedes SUV in the snow and ice and then ask her to do donuts in a parking? It was a stupid idea. Sure
enough, it was $6,000 of repairs for just a little corner of the car. Thank you, Mercedes-Benz. Bop, bop.
It was kind of enjoyable to see my mom kind of blame my dad for something that I thought was my fault.
It's still now one of these stories that we tell around the dinner table at holidays about how dumb I was to have tried to give her a lesson. But I still think that to this day, she's never had a wreck since then. And I do believe that I can attribute that to being with her when she had her first wreck, because every teenager is going to do that. And how special is it that she got to do it with her dad?